I was thinking it might be fun to have it on just for fun, just to see what would happen. It'd be like one of those mirror, you know, like when you go into a room where there's mirrors on both sides and every direction you look, it's just like infinity. It would be like that, only with voice.
Yeah, exactly. It would keep echoing and echoing and echoing. Well, we're live.
Look at that. Look at that. We are live.
Hello, YouTube. This is Mr. Zeke, and I'm at the watch building bench, and I have two really fun guests with me today. They're part of the. Well, I'll let you guys introduce yourself.
All right. Let's do that. So I am Eugene. On the Instagram, I go by Evel Custom, and I am one of the 5 chaps that make up Cinco Mentes. We are the guys who created the Firefly Luminous dial. It's kind of our first project, first foray into a bit of creativity when it comes to the mod parts world. So there's 5 of us all together. I'm one, and then Jim here is another part of the group.
Yeah. No, I'm the European representative out of the UK. Well, European for the short term, anyway. But yeah, no, I go by Davy Jones 1905. Some of the numbers on Instagram. Yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. I thought it was like one of those things that you wanted Davy Jones, and then Instagram said, "Well, Davy Jones is taken, but you can have Davy Jones 955877623."
Yeah, I was like, what's this Instagram thing I keep hearing of? I'll use one of my junk emails, one of my burner emails, just in case I end up spam to hell, you know. It ends up just being stuck with it. Yeah. So should have shown a bit more foresight.
It works. It's a memorable, name. So
like 9 numbers.
But I guess if I wanted to elaborate on this whole Cinco Mentes thing a bit. So this whole thing came about. What I found is on. I see this especially on Instagram, not as much on other social media outlets, is that you get a lot of people who, when you follow a hobby, in this case, watch collecting or watch modding or really anything with watches, you get a lot of connections with people, kindred people who are just happy to help, happy to engage in discussions, happy to give you pointers if you ask for them. And I found it to be a very kind of positive experience. And, being someone who just always likes to tinker with stuff and try to create and whatever, I thought, hey, let me reach out to a few guys and see if they're, if they'd be game for trying to create a little something. So that's kind of how it all started. So the 5 of us are actually from like everywhere in the world.
I dropped off the line.
Was that?
Who we got?
We lost Jim for a moment here. He says he's reconnecting. Hopefully he'll get back in. If not, we can. So anyway, what I was saying is, so basically the 5 of us are from like everywhere in the world. Jim is in Yorkshire, United Kingdom. We've got Fadi in Puerto Rico. We got Fernando, who is originally from Venezuela and is now living in the Pacific Northwest, working for a small coffee company.
All right, are we back?
We're back, yeah. I don't know if we got that. So we got Fernando, who's in the Pacific Northwest, working for a small coffee company. Not gonna drop any names. and then we've got JD who's in Ohio, and I'm personally in Iowa. So we're like just scattered, mostly around the United States, obviously, but scattered, which makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I would say. Makes board me.
I wake up every morning and I've got 160 missed messages on WhatsApp to go through. I'm wondering what happened the day before.
Yeah, but it's like a time machine. You're a day ahead of everyone.
Yeah, sort of. We don't want to get into another conversation about GMT.
Oh my God.
That's eaten up the last few days. Everyone in the world seems to think that GMT is the time in Greenwich, London, right now, because it's not during daylight savings. So I think we set the call up for the wrong time initially based on that. Very horological.
Well, I mean, I guess it's better than I mean, they used to have like 5 different centralized time zones at one point, like France and England competing for that, and that just was a whole thing. So yeah, Zeke, I was gonna say, I don't know if I'm sure you got a lot of people who know you there who are following, and maybe some who don't. So do you want to kind of give a little bit of background on yourself as well?
I'm in Northeast Texas. I'm going to a watchmaking school at Paris Junior College in Paris, Texas. I got into this. I've always been into watches since I got my first. Oh gosh, I was probably about 10 years old, and I got a Swatch jellyfish, where
Nice.
you could see the insides. And ever since then, I've been just fascinated with how watches work. But I've done a lot of things in my life, and I've been very blessed with a great family, the wife and 2 sons. And I had to wait until the sons were pretty much grown to jump off and pursue this as a actual career. And so, but I'm here now, and I'm really, really anxious to get through school. School's about 2 years. I've gone through the first semester, and theory wise, I've most of the second semester, because we were sheltered in place this past second half of the first semester. So we did a lot of theory. And so I'm one of those people that when I do something, I jump all in. I bought a bunch of extra tools, and I've got books all over the shelf about watch repair and theory and history. And so, in fact, in the chat side, you see Jared Troy. Jared is actually one of my friends who's in school with me.
Oh, nice.
And so
hi, Jared.
He's going to be, I'm sure he'll be critiquing what I do. So
nice. Maybe we'll make sure to take some critique and pass it on, because I've got an eye on the comments here. So
yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, if you guys can handle the comments, because I can only see my monitor at a glance because it's next to me, so I'm just making sure that I'm centralized here on what I'm doing. And so, but okay, so
by the way, we already have a question actually from Fernando.
Okay.
One of the gang here. He wants to know where you get the fancy plastic ended tweezers.
These are from Jules Burrell. When you get into watchmaking, if you graduate from just a minor hobby into closer to a profession, you will become intimately friendly with the supply house, Jules Burrell. In fact, this movement we're going to use today came from them. Jules, this isn't a plug. And for everyone watching, I bought everything to do this build. This isn't sponsored by anyone. But Jules Burrell is probably in the United States the largest supplier of watchmaking tools. I got my my Bergeon hand setters from Jules Burrell. My bronze tweezers are from Burrell. And these are specifically for working with their Horatech. made in Switzerland, and they're specifically for working with watch hands, because anyone who's ever touched a watch hand knows how fragile they are.
Yes,
and so
indeed.
these are designed, they're non-marring, and they kind of serve a double use because they're also great for working with batteries. Because if you handle batteries with or cells, watch cells, with the wrong kind of tweezers, you can short them out. And so these kind of serve as double duty for me. The tips are replaceable. Over time, they'll probably get marred up. So
and anti-magnetic as well, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, because they're aluminum and the tips are Teflon. So there's no magnetism to them, which is really why you'll see a lot of watchmakers using bronze or brass tweezers and stuff like this, because the last thing we want to do is introduce a magnetic field into a watch that we're either servicing or building, because you're basically stepping on your own foot right from the get-go. So,
right. Yeah. So what's the point of starting something, like magnetizing something just to demagnetize?
Yeah, exactly. And then you get someone like me who I don't have a professional grade, degausser or demagnetizer. So, I really have to be careful with what I introduced here to the watch bench, because there's magnetic forces everywhere. Now, I'm gonna answer a question that hasn't been asked, but it was asked by someone on Instagram, where I got this particular tool from, the transparent watchmaker's pick. And you can see one end is filed down like a screwdriver, and the other end is sort of a little. It's a punch. It's a poker, but it's a little blunted. You cannot buy these. You have to make them. You buy the acrylic rod. This is part of the Swiss, the actual WOS step, the Swiss training. When you go through watchmaking school, this is one of the first things you do, and it's designed to teach you how to be precise, how both sides or facets of the screwdriver are the same length, so that the end, what's known as the web, is exactly centered down the long axis of the rod. And so they give you this first and say, here, learn how to be precise with files and measurements. And so I made this on my own. My instructor, who's heavily involved was heavily involved in the Swiss programs, I had noticed several Swiss videos where everyone had those things on their bench, and I asked him about it, and he actually provided me with the original blueprints to make my own. And I had to order the cast acrylic. You can't use regular acrylic because it gets gummy when you file on it. So it's actually cast. Yeah, it's cast acrylic. And so if you ever visit a watchmaker and you see one of those laying on his bench, it's usually a pretty good sign that, I'm not saying in my case, but in their case, they probably know what they're doing. I just like to make things. So
yeah, I definitely haven't got one of those.
So, but what's funny is you don't even start with that. You actually start by building a jig that locks into a bench vise. And all the dimensions on this wooden jig are exacting, so that you can lay your acrylic in the jig to do your filing with. So it's sort of building up to getting you in this precision mindset, which we all know, if you're into watches, you understand that precision is paramount. So
right, and it's interesting. With some of the modern, or some of the stuff that like a lot of the modding community works with, like those Hattori movements and kind of the cases, and how they're how the plastic case or the plastic movement retainer holder is. It's pretty easy to kind of be imprecise and be and end with a product that for the most part, kind of does the job.
No, yeah, absolutely. Versus, I mean, if you open the back of I think where you're headed, if you open the back of a true Swiss watch, you're not going to see a plastic movement spacer in there. It's either going to be a direct fit like Rolex, or it's going to have a metal spacer with screw down movement holder tabs. And so, and that's one of the nice parts about working with the Hattori movements or the Seiko movements is you can simply push a dial into those holes. So
right, yeah, exactly. It's much so it's a little bit of it's kind of it can be misleading. So, if you take a Seiko movement out of a case and put it into another case or what have you.
Oh, I'm a watchmaker.
Think, oh yeah, I'll do the same thing with this this ETA powered watch, and it's a much different experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, here is one that I built a few years ago, and this one is actually powered by an ETA 2824. So this inside this one, it actually has, it's a, oh, there you go. I thought it was a solid case back, but inside it actually has movement tabs, movement holder tabs and screws, and it has a metal spacer designed to bridge that gap. So yeah, it really is a whole different. I should probably put some power to this. It really is a whole different world between real, not to take away, but between watch making and watch modding, we'll say. But,
right, absolutely, and I think one of the cool thing, one of the things that hopefully we got some people who will be joining us to watch. I think one of the kind of big benefits, or one of the things that we can do, is there are things that some tips that we could maybe have you give to the watch modders out there that won't make them watchmakers, but will make them make less of those kind of errors that seem like they're not that big a deal, but really, are important to avoid. Kind of some of the stuff we talked about, I think a couple of days ago when we all chatted about touching the dial and where your hands go and working with hands.
Right.
Is a profoundly frustrating experience, especially if you're starting out.
Right.
And dust and fibers and hair.
Oh,
that sort of stuff, which just plagues me.
You can't. I mean, you can't. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You cannot understate the importance of a sterile workspace. I'm looking at my workbench right now, and I can see every fleck of dust on here, and it's pretty clean. But you get to the point where, it actually gets frustrating as a watchmaking student, because you become so sensitive to dust that when you're wearing your watch and it has a leather strap on it, and so there's that little gap between the case, the lugs, and the strap, you see dust in there, and it just makes your skin crawl, because you're like, oh, I got to get that dust out of there, and you almost become OCD about dust, because on the inside of these movements, the measurements are down to the thousandths of a millimeter. And so, we're talking literally thousandths of a millimeter, and a piece of dust can stop a movement or even, cause, premature wear on a movement. And you think, I've got this watch, I built it, it'll be great, it'll last forever. And a year later, the thing won't run, and you can't figure out why. And it's like, literally, there's a little bit of skin inside that watch that has stopped everything.
Yeah, and that's really something, especially if you're a mechanically minded person and you have, and you've got the ability to kind of troubleshoot to an extent just from that. And then you run into something where you're like, everything's there, the balance wheel seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing, and the thing won't run. And,
right.
And that's where the nuance really starts getting in, and it's I think it's a fascinating world.
Yeah, it's micromechanics, really. It's micromechanics at one of it's almost, nanomechanics. When you're talking about, yeah, I mean, if you can really use screwdrivers as a prime example. If you look at a screwdriver, I'll grab here my smallest screwdriver, and you think that the tip on this screwdriver is 0.6 of a millimeter. That's the diameter. Wow. That's not even the filed down facets. So, the web itself on a 0.6 millimeter screwdriver, the web, which I keep saying the web, I'm using the actual horological terms. The sides of the screwdriver, the sides are called facets, and the blade tip is called the web. But the web there you're talking about, now you're in the hundreds of a millimeter. Because if the diameter is in the tenths, 0.6 millimeters, and I've filed down angles, now that web is literally, that means that screw slot is in the hundreds of a millimeter. And so, yeah, it doesn't take a lot to stop. The mechanical watches are a marvel of creation, but and they walk a very fine line, a very fine balance between working and not working.
Yeah, so. No, absolutely, and it's funny because watching some watchmaker videos, like Watch Repair Channel, channel, and some others, you see them point out, or the Instagram feed from Clock Savant is always phenomenal, and you see them point out things like little gashes on screw heads, little tiny scratches here and there. And when you first start following that kind of stuff, you're like, why are they being so picky? Why, whatever. But really, it makes sense because a person, if your primary focus is precision from the very, very get-go, right? If that's all you're trained in initially is precision, and you build from there, then seeing that gash is basically telling another watchmaker that the person who worked on that watch last was not very good.
And right? Then that leads you down.
Going to make the watch run less, unless of course a little piece of the metal spec makes it into the movement with. But even then, like a tiny scratch on the plate isn't necessarily going to make the watch not run as well, but it could give you a hint as to the quality of the person who worked on it last.
Yes, that's where I was hoping you were going to go. It gives you, now you're going to doubt the capabilities and the carefulness of the last person to service it. Those are indicators that the last person or someone in the past who serviced this, didn't give enough care and respect to the movement to use the right size screwdriver so that it didn't, what's called pop out as he was tightening or loosening it and scratch that bridge plate or whatever damage you might find. That's, those are indicators that somewhere along the line, it'd be, it's tantamount to an auto mechanic who, we all come to expect that when we take our car in for service, when we get it, it's got, those paper floor mats on the floor, and they do that to sort of tell you, hey, we value and respect your property. And if you go somewhere and you don't, your floorboards are all muddy or dirty or greasy, then you start to question, well, geez, I mean, they didn't take the care to take care of, moving my car inside and outside of the garage. What else didn't they do?
Right. Troy, by the way, Jared Troy commented that you should show off the big one, the 2.5 millimeter one, for a point of comparison.
Oh yeah, I'll put them side by side. So I'll do my largest and smallest screwdrivers, and this is a school set. These aren't my Bergeon. So there's my largest and smallest side by side.
Oh wow, that is a big difference.
Yeah.
And it looks like I may have lost. We may have lost Jim on the call here. Let's see.
Yeah, I think I can hear it beeping.
Yeah. Let me call back in maybe here. Yeah.
Appreciate all you guys there in YouTube land hanging out with us. I promise we're going to build this watch. Just trying to give any late stragglers a chance to get in. If you got to see the on Instagram or on Facebook, if you got to see the preview, you saw me cut the dial feet and prep the dial for installation onto the movement. The movement that it is actually on right now is not the movement we're going to be using. I'm going to crack open a brand new Hattori NH35, which is an automatic movement that Seiko sells wholesale. They use it in their watches under a different name. They name it. It has a different nomenclature when it's inside a Seiko watch. But when they sell it to wholesalers, all right. So I don't know who I have on the phone. So it looks like okay.
Got me, I think.
Okay, got Eugene.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay. Do we have
let me see if
I don't know. Does he? Okay.
Let's see. I'm gonna try. Yeah, I'm gonna try to cut Jim back in here.
Okay.
His for some reason it's dropping him out every once in a while.
It's gonna happen. The wonders of modern technology.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're gonna use a phone to connect to the internet to connect to another phone.
Sorry about that.
There we go. We're back. So I was gonna say, yeah. So I believe the Seiko equivalent is the 4R36.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And the 4R5.
Yeah. So if you have a Seiko watch, and it's a 4R36 movement or a 4R35, whatever it is. I was reading about it earlier. Now I really want to get a 6R15 movement to build a watch with. But that's essentially the same movement that's in this case, this box from Jules Burrell. It just was wholesaled out instead of assembled into a Seiko movement. So, or a Seiko wristwatch rather.
So are they assembling these in the same factory? Do you know?
As far as I can tell, I you hear so much, and that's one of the difficulties is getting through all of the armchair experts who say because I just heard somebody the other day in one of the forums say that the only difference between the Japanese branded models and the Malaysian models are in Malaysia they have actual Japanese watchmakers overseeing the production of the watches. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that. So, I always, and I still kind of cling to the idea that the SKXs or the SARBs, the SARBs, if they're Japanese, if they're branded Japan on the dial, then they were manufactured in Japan. I know that Japan has a completely, or rather Seiko in Japan has a completely automated factory that they can literally run it with the lights off. There's no human presence on the manufacturing floor.
Wow.
Yeah, it's completely climate controlled and automated. And so,
wait, so that includes like the movement assembly?
I don't know exactly what all is done in that factory. I just know that factory exists. That it is a 100% automated factory. That's the thing is with the Seikos that we end up with, unless you're plopping down the greenbacks to pick up a grand Seiko, you have to understand what you're getting. It really, in my opinion, and it's everything. Everything that comes out of the hole in my face is just my opinion. And so, but I think they're a fantastic value proposition. I think that's the best way to put it. You know, for what you get, the bang for your buck, I find it hard to top Seiko. And I think a lot of a lot of companies owe their very existence to Seiko. You know, what if Seiko one day said, "Hey, we're not going to sell our movements anymore," like Etta did? You know, think of what that would do to the industry. Because so many micro brands.
And in reality, I don't know that, you know, I don't know that they'd have any benefit, you know, because Miyota's already got a pretty strong position in the market.
Yeah, Citizen
as
is
movement providers as well.
Yep.
My guess is that Hattori Seiko is probably at the top, but Miyota is right there, and that they'd be losing a huge chunk of market if they did that.
Sure, Citizen is
giving a lot of market share to China.
Yeah, because
like that would step in.
Miyota is Citizen, so you know Citizen Watch is genius. But you know Seiko's like 5 different companies, all under the Seiko Epson banner. And so they're literally 5 different companies that fall under a parent organization. So, and that's what makes a Grand Seiko so fascinating is it's its own company. People go, well, you know, this is like the baby Grand Seiko. No, it's not. It may, you know, in your eyes, you know, it may look like it, but Grand Seikos have no relation to Seiko whatsoever that we would see.
I did not know that. That's pretty.
Yeah, Grand Seiko is its own entity. It works. The watches come out of their own factory. There's nothing shared between the 2 factories, or you know, however many regular Seiko factories there are. So, which is why I think they're an undervalued watch or timepiece, because people don't realize the precision in the artistry that goes into making them, all the way down to the polishing. The I think it's Hiratsu polishing. They're teaching that technique to the Swiss now, because yeah, that's, I mean, for Seiko to be teaching the Swiss how to polish cases, that, I mean, that tells you a lot. So, but yeah, I was just
the funny thing is the name the polishing technique actually comes from a Japanese interpretation of a German word of what the Swiss were using, and it's something like really simple, like high polish, and it's just what the Japanese, you know, how they take they take foreign words and kind of just convert them into
Zaratsu. It sounds way cooler though. Instead of high polish, he says my watch has Zaratsu polishing on it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, anything. Yeah, once you put it like a Japanese kind of moniker, it just carries across quality, and it's interesting. You know, that's really not just a. You know, it's not in name only, because you know, I was in Japan with some friends and relatives just was that last summer. And it's amazing. We went to a French bakery. You know, it's a Japanese bakery, but it's and I swear, I think the pastries they did a better job of French pastries than the ones that I've had in France.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. That's absolutely hilarious.
Yep, yeah. Jared just commented that Orient is under the Seiko umbrella, and that's another thing too. People often misrepresent Orient as being part of Seiko in the concept of like Seiko watches that we think of, but they're really not. They're an independent company. They make their own movements. Their movement is based. They bought this when Orient was still independent. They bought the specs of the 7000 series movement from Seiko, which is the predecessor to the 7S series and the NH35s and 4Rs and all that stuff. But they from that point on it diverged. It diverged, and they're their own. They were making their own movement developments. They have their own GMT movement that they've developed off of that, and more Um,
So it's
and more
kind of like
recently,
Solito.
Epson purchased Orient, I think, in the late '90s or early 2000s. But they are, though under the umbrella, they are an independent watch company, so to speak.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, let's do this. Because I'm itching here to put this thing together, and and that's one of the things I want to make clear is, this is not watch mechanics. This is watch assembly. There's a huge gulf between, taking apart a movement and assembling a watch with a movement that's already up and running from the factory. I don't want there to be any misconception that, there is a big difference between the two. This is, while if you're new and uninitiated and have never done any of this, it may look insurmountable. It may look, like this is really, really difficult. This is really nothing compared to, correcting errors in a hairspring.
Oh boy!
Or
don't get me started on that.
Or so if I'm going to, so first off, let's talk a little bit real quick about do's and don'ts. You'll notice that I've got these wonderful white finger. These are called finger cots. It's basically a glove without the palm. I don't touch anything on the watch from the moment the back comes off without finger cots on. And there are certain parts of the watch that I do everything in my power not to touch, even with finger cots. For instance, the face of the dial. I don't want to touch the face of the dial. Now, you will see me holding the dial either by the dial feet or by the edges of the dial, but I don't want to touch the dial face. Same goes with the movement. You'll see me holding, I may pick up the movement by the plastic movement ring on the outer edge, but you will not see me touch the oscillating weight on the back, which many people just call the rotor. It's called an oscillating weight. You won't see me touch the top side or the bottom side of the movement, even with finger cots, because even finger cots can transfer dust or contaminants to that part of the movement. Another don't is, the dial, when the dial isn't on the movement, it's okay for me to use my hand bellows, which is what this is called. These are hand bellows. They're for blowing air to blow dust off of something if you spot a piece of dust. It's okay to blow dust off of a dial right up until the point you put it on the movement. And I've seen this take place in videos on the YouTube, on the interweb, where a watch modder or a self-proclaimed watch builder will get the watch or get the dial and the hands and everything on and then blow dust off of it. And that is a no-no because the movement has oils in the jewels, which is where all the pivot points are. And there's a space, I'll show you here, between the dial and the center pinions. And if I blow on this dial, with the dial on the movement, that air is forced down in there and it can actually disperse that oil into places where it shouldn't be. So you don't blow on it and after it's on the movement. At that point, you use what's called a tacky tip. And you also notice that, I don't know if you noticed or not, but you notice how all my tools are aligned at the top of my workspace. That's actually a manufacturing technique called knolling, K-N-O-W something or other with ing on the end. It's in my notes, but that is to increase productivity. You always put your tools at a right angle to the edge of your work or parallel with the work surface. It's for organizational skills, but tacky tip is what you use to remove debris after the hands are on or the dials are on. And all it really is, and it's in here, I'll get it out of here. All it is a cardboard stick with some adhesive on the end. It does not leave any trace that it was ever there. Now, I see in a lot of videos people using Rodico to remove dust. You don't do that. Rodico, believe it or not, will leave a residue. And so Rodico is just there. Really, all we use it in class for is to clean the tips of our screwdrivers, or or our oilers. We'll punch them into the Rodico. But real watchmaking is all about having the right tools to do the job correctly. And so that's really, I just wanted to get those few things out of the way before we start this. But it also helps when taking on a project like this, and you'll notice everything is either boxed up or covered when it comes to the watch. And there's a reason for that, because that even the hands are in their own little box, and they're marked with NH35, so I know what movement these hands go to. And it's all about organization. And I've seen some really good examples of organization on YouTube. And then I've seen some in real life, some just absolutely terrible watchmaker shops where it's like, I don't know how you find anything. So
a couple of questions. One that I think we can address in a little bit, that's coming from the forum here, is about getting rid of dust on the underside of the crystal, which I think we can probably address as you get to assembling the watch.
Yeah.
And the other one was actually talking about the workstation, because I mean, if you're a hobby watchmaker, I would say the majority of people out there kind of following this kind of thing, you're not going to be in some kind of a room, you might be in a spare bedroom or what have you.
Right. Right.
Dust is flying around, that kind of stuff. How do you manage to keep your workstation, clean in the way that it's necessary to do this?
Right. Okay. So that's a fantastic question, because obviously, the hobbyist is not going to have a clean room environment. They're not going to have the white suit and the, HEPA filtered air and all that jazz. And I'll put it this way. This is your friend. Okay. So
there we go.
It's a 3-inch paintbrush, not expensive, but it is awesome for cleaning your workbench off. Your hand bellows are awesome for blowing dust away from your primary work area. This right here that I have the dial covered with, this is just a cheap Tupperware. It's not even Tupperware brand. It's from the Dollar General. And I just don't have the lid on it right now. So keeping everything covered is a great first step. Keeping everything put away when you're not using it is an even better first step. So the bench that I'm working on right now, if this camera had zoom, I would back out and everything, is from Harbor Freight. It's just their long wooden, it's a 6-foot wooden bench with 4 drawers and a lower shelf. And then the matting that I'm working on is from Walmart. It's drawer liner. It's rubber drawer liner. And then you just cut out the size work area that you think is appropriate, and keep that pad spotless. And so, it's just becoming aware of the dust, and then doing everything. If you can't, like I'm looking around it right now and I see dust. When we go into class, the first thing we do is we dust the room with wet cloths. But that's a controlled environment. This is a workshop out in the country with cheap windows and cheap doors. And so there is dust in here. I just have to be hyper vigilant about where that dust, there's dust on my desk. I can see it just turning to the right and looking at my desk. I can see the dust. But in this vicinity right here where I am actively engaged in working, I have done everything within my power to keep the dust from this area. So really, if you focus, on good, we'll call it workspace hygiene. If you focus on good workspace hygiene and then outstanding workplace hygiene in the actual area that you're working, and you're storing everything when you're not using it, you shouldn't have a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, so I think should we get rolling with this with the build?
Absolutely. If everybody's ready, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and remove the. I just used a test movement. I just used it's a broken movement. I used a test movement, and a friend of mine printed these movement holders for me. But I just used a test movement that I have in various state of disassembly when I trim the dial feet. And so I'm going to actually, before I take that off the test movement, I'm going to move it out of the way, and I'm going to cover it up with my. And you can really use anything. I mean, this is a glass decorative. I read a watchmaking book by Freed. Let me see. I'm sorry, DeCarle. DE space CARLE. And it's an older book, and he talks about going. He's in Switzerland in his off time to pubs and asking them for any broken wine glasses they had, where the stem broke off the actual body of the glass, and they would gladly give them to him, and he would take them home and he would use them to cover his work when he wasn't working on it, because they have a good diameter and they're very large, so you don't have to worry about it touching any of the pieces that you're working on. But how creative do you want to be? So luckily, we don't live in that era. We can actually buy stuff to cover stuff. So I got the movement here, and I'm gonna inspect it. You don't tear anything open when you're working with watches. You're very careful about how you open things, because you don't want to introduce damage to a brand new movement, obviously. And so let's go ahead. I'm going to.
That's interesting. So I buy these movements on AliExpress usually, and I don't think I've ever received one in a sealed plastic bag before. Is that something that JB do, or is that?
No, this is how it should be. The winding stem should be sealed by itself. The movement should be sealed. This comes straight from Hattori. This goes from Hattori to Jules Burrell. They slap a sticker on the case, and then it comes straight from Jules Burrell to me. So I know that when you buy, I have seen the bulk packaging that doesn't come with the building stem that we have here with the large handle. I have seen those trays of the bulk movements. I don't know where those come from, but as I understand it, this is how they come. You probably can specify to Hattori how you want it to come. I'm gonna dodge out of the camera real quick because I have to use my loop for this part. I just want to look at the underside of the movement, make sure I don't have anything that just right off the bat doesn't look right. No, the dial feet holes are lined up. The oscillating weight is moving smoothly. Yep, nothing hanging up. I want to feel what it feels like to put a wind to it. Oh, it's very clean. You can even hear it. Let's see. I don't know if that's coming through. It's quiet, but it's a very nice tactile winding. The movement works are definitely. And let's see here. Yep, and we've already got life to the balance and the balance spring. So it would have been real easy for me to just reach over and touch that oscillating weight and move it out of the way for you to see. But like I said, I don't want any contact with the movement. I'm just wanting contact with the plastic spacer. And so, but you can see the oscillating weight the balance wheel just beating away after just a couple of turns of the crown. So I think we got a good one here. So we're going to check the date function. Even though this dial doesn't have a date, if the date function isn't working, that could be indicative of another, an issue with the movement that I might not want to use it. So, yep, we got a nice clean date. changeover. And so I'm going to pull it out again, and I'm going to rotate the time till we get a date turn. Okay, so now I know, even though there's not a date, now I know I am in the position for straight up 12 o'clock. So that's pretty much my inspection of the movement. And I'm going to set the winding stem aside until we're at that point, to that point of the build. So I'm going to come back here to my dial. So we're going to start with putting the dial on, but first we have to take the dial off the junk movement, or the I'm sorry, there's no such thing as a junk movement. It's just a movement in disrepair. And so we use a little slots Hattori or Seiko was kind enough to give us to release the dial from the movement. There we are. And so, and I got to tell you guys really knocked it out of the ballpark when you designed this dial. The color is, I can't describe the color. You just have to see it in real life. I saw the pictures and I always thought, man, I'm going to get this dial and it's going to have sort of a yellowish color to it. Because, you know, everyone wants to show off the loom shots. But, you know, in daylight, it really is, you know, pretty much white. But it's a really interesting matte white. It's not a bright white. It's very matte finish. And so
It's almost an enamel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe not an enamel. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you see it up close. There's this kind of almost a really fine texture to it, which I think is very
yeah, it's got like a grain.
Cool.
Yeah, it's got sort of a grainy texture to it. So
and yeah, the whiteness. I was gonna say the whiteness of the dial was something that we kind of made sure to you know, that was something we really wanted to make sure was there when we talked to the manufacturer. One of the options was to use the loom coating the straight C1 loom coating, but that was going to give the dial a bit of a greenish tint. And then the other option was to mix in this special coloring white oil that would give us this result with the color of the dial, was going to ultimately sacrifice some small percentage of the loom glow at night.
right.
And we opted for the white because you know, that was really what we wanted. We wanted a quality white dial during the day. We've seen some of, like, I think Hoyer does some full loom dials, and their dial is greenish in daylight, and I just kind of,
Yeah.
you know, we thought that was a little unappealing, so we really wanted the white dial, something that looked essentially like a negative image of a black military dial.
Yeah, it really does have that old school vibe to it. It's almost like a faded white, you know, and so
Yeah, like eggshell almost. That was actually
Eggshell.
one of the comments here is that it's almost like eggshell.
yeah, eggshell's a good description. So, all right, so we now have the dial married to the movement. So now we get to the step that I think I see the most number of comments on, especially in the modding forums, is, you know, hand installation. You know, I just ruined, you know, I see these comments about, you know, I just, you know, how do you put hands on? I just ruined, and the second hand is seems to be by far the worst. But in a lot of times, I think that stems from, one, not using the proper tools, and two, not understanding that, like any fine motor skill, this takes a ton of practice.
Yes,
In watchmaking school, I was telling somebody one time, in watchmaking school, they actually teach us how to straighten hands, because, you know, your first 40 hours of dealing with hands, literally you're going to just nonstop be bending hands. And so you have to understand that. And so, but you get to the point where it becomes, everybody has their own flavor. Everyone has their own style. I like to set my hands on with the dial sideways rather than, looking at it at 12 o'clock. Now, once the hand is initially set in place before it's actually pressed down, and I think that's the other thing is a lot of people overpress the hands. They want to just push down one time and okay, it's on. And that ends up with a lot of problems, because actually putting a hand on is so that for all intents and purposes, what I just did is put the hand on. So now what I want to do is I really want to get this lined up perfectly at 12 o'clock, because I'm going to come to a point where I want to test. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way that is set right now. Now, with a hand tool, with a hand pressing tool, one of the most important things is to press straight down. It's very easy to end up at an angle when you're pressing down. That's obviously exaggerated. If you're pressing like that, you need glasses. But you want to make sure that you're pressing straight down on the pinion, in the hub, the part of the hand that sits onto the watch is called the hub. And so you want to make sure that you're pressing straight down. And so two hands is actually, and I know that kind of wrecks the camera's view, but I'm here to build myself a nice watch. So I'm going to go ahead and press this. I'm going to start pressing this down. And like I said, it's not just one press and I'm done. It's a series of light, small presses. And I don't want to press it down too far because I want the same distance between each hand. There should be the same distance between the dial and the hour hand and the minute hand and the minute hand and the second hand. That's something that a lot of people don't realize. But if you go to your local authorized dealer and look at a really nice watch at an angle through the crystal, you'll notice when you line the hands up, say you set the time, it's a hack setting or a stop second, and you line the hands up, they're all equidistant from each other. And so that's a little something because the hubs are designed that way. So I want this hand to be parallel to the dial. I don't want the tip of the hand to be pointing up because that could lead to binding up with a minute hand. And I want it to be level. So it's just, being patient. Going slow, being patient, just like anything else.
Worse than getting all the way to putting the second hand on, wrestling with the second hand for like an hour, and then firing out your hour hands. It's all going to come back off again.
Yeah, that's okay. So just about there. It's just a little nose down. The least sexy thing you do as a watchmaker, but the first thing that people will notice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
and it's interesting. I would say we could probably take a moment. I think you said those hands come from A Juice Tea, right? From Alexander James.
The hands don't. The case and crystal did.
Okay, but one of the things that we've discovered is that not all hands that are specifically made for Seiko movements are made alike.
Oh, absolutely.
Are not always. Most of the time, the hour hand is not an issue, but a lot of times you think that the minute hands are made to spec, but some of the distributors, the minute hand is all loosey goosey, almost like it's made to ETA spec or something.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not going to drop any names, but there's definitely some that we, the whole lot of us, kind of as a group, have come to a conclusion that we don't obtain hands from anymore because
there you go. Those are hands that don't fit.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are hands that when you put the hour hand on and then put the minute hand on, one of the two is just going to start sliding around the dial when you turn it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which Yeah, which is so. I was going to say that one of the, and we'll talk about him when we get to the case. But Alexander James, he has his own watch brand, and his parts come under the name Ajuice T.
Right.
Is one of the ones that I've consistently gotten great fitting hands from.
I have never.
All of his components really just are made to good specifications. He takes time to do the quality control.
He does. That guy, I tell you what, I've had conversations with him about it because he does not sacrifice anything for quality. I am 100% with you there. In fact, back here in the back of my bench, I still have sealed up 2 sets of his 62 Moss hands. And I bought them because I know eventually I'll use them, and he has a hard time keeping them in stock. But you're absolutely right. I mean, his product is on point. That's why I'm so adamant about only using his cases, because I know the movements fit him. And I try to only use his crystals. And I've heard people say, well, I don't like the color white. I don't like a white crystal gasket. And to my response to that would be, well, okay, source another crystal gasket. And I've actually talked to him, and he's working on sourcing black crystal gaskets. But, in the meantime, appreciate everything else that's done right. The crowns screw down so smooth. The holes for the spring bars are beautifully machined. You don't have, I've gotten cases where the ends of the spring bars are real loose in the holes because they're over machined, and then you hear a clicking every time you move your wrist. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's yes.
That's so frustrating.
They're designed specifically for a certain kind of spring bar, and then your typical thin spring bars don't slide right through or what have you. But the thing that I really I was going to say, the other thing is that he's probably the only mod part provider that does not basically just make versions of already existing Seiko cases,
no.
Right?
Yeah, no. I don't know anyone else.
The other standout is obviously Crystal Times, who does make reproductions of Seiko cases, but also makes really cleverly designed their versions of their own kind of versions and plays on existing stuff. But I think aside from them, Alex he has his own designs. It's designed to fit Seiko, but it's not like, here's my version of an SKX.
Right.
You're gonna make a watch that's truly original.
Yeah, no, and that's it's not very often where I just don't have anything to add new to it. But you're right. I mean, the cases that the cases that he sells are his cases. They're everyone else. I say that using a broad brush. I understand that, but everyone else, you're right. It's hey, we sell turtle cases, or we sell SKX cases, or we sell, and they're direct one-for-one copies of the factory Seiko models, where his Alexander James's cases are his cases, and so. About the closest thing I could compare them to would be like a SARB case, but they're not even a SARB case. And so, okay,
no, they're really quite. There's there's aesthetic reminiscences of an Explorer Milgauss elements, but their curvature is different. I mean, it's completely its own thing. And I've actually never seen a branded watch with that kind of case. So so
it makes it nice.
I'm going to stop on this tangent here, but I think he deserves lots of kudos. He's like one of the unsung heroes in this kind of community.
Well, yeah, and he works full time. He does it after working a full day, and so that's that. I give him mad kudos for that. So, so now I have the hour and the minute hand on. So before I go any farther, I want to make sure that as the hour hand travels around, that it switches, it lines up correctly with 3, 6, 9, and 12. So basically, I'm going to advance this, because what I want to make sure is the hour hand's on 3 right as the minute hand hits 0, just like that. I don't know how well that's coming through, but I want to make sure that, and that's why I'm so fanatical, or watchmakers are so fanatical about hand placement, is I want the hour to be dead on the center of 6 when the minute hand reaches dead on 12 o'clock. And so, and that's about, and if it's not, then it's time to do it again. So 9 o'clock's a great tester. You see the hour hand is split right on that red marker for 9, and the hour hand is right on the red marker for 12. And that lets me know that this thing is going to be, it's going to line up at every hour throughout the day. And so now the bane of everyone's existence.
So before you do that, there's a quick question here. You're using the same hand pressing tool for both hour and minute, or all of the hand pressings?
Okay, so yes and no. I discovered early on that the hour and the minute could be pressed with the same tip. I actually have all the different tips that go with this Bergeon. I have to be economical as a student because I don't work, and so instead of buying the whole set of hand tools, I bought one hand tool, and I bought replacement tips in all the different sizes. And working with the Seikos, or Hattoris or Seikos, or however you want to skin that rabbit. I found that the black tip works nicely with a soft touch for both the hour and the minute hand. Now, the white tip on the Bergeon set is the flat tip. There's no hole in there. And so I say that, I'm pretty sure there's, oh yeah, no, it's a tiny, probably a 0.17 millimeter hole. And I use that for my second hand. And that way I'm not taking the time to change out tips. But I would not necessarily recommend that for a beginner, a new person to this hobby or this profession, because you want to use the correct tool. I just discovered, through hours of setting hands, that with a light touch, the black tip would work just fine. And so, in a perfect world, I would have, 3 or 4 different of the hand setters, and they would all have different colored tips in them. But perhaps when I graduate, I'll get a graduation gift of hand setters.
Was that a suggestion?
I don't know. That was a plea in desperation, I think, more than anything. I've discovered that I have to pick my battles. Like, I bought Bergeon screwdrivers.
Nice.
And that's what I use in class rather than the ones that came in our toolkit. I invested in Bergeon dial guards. So when I remove hands from a dial, I'm not using plastic bags. I'm using actually Bergeon dial guards, especially when dealing with your darker color dials. If you've ever worked with a matte finish black dial, you know that you can look at it wrong and end up with a scuff on it. And so,
yeah, just the slightest thing, really. And the thing is, you won't notice the scuff until you've got it.
It's all case stuff,
and the screw in the back on.
And then you're looking at it through the crystal, and you kind of tilt it in a certain light, and suddenly you're like, "Oh no, oh."
Yeah, that's the worst, right? And then the crystal will accentuate it.
Oh yeah, it's a magnifying glass.
John Wells, who joined us, by the way, says hi.
What's that?
Gentleman named John Wells just joined us and is saying hi to you.
Oh yeah, John. He works on watches. He works on pocket watches, and he's starting to move into. We've known each other for several years, and he's kind of a jack of all trades, and he kind of got into watches through eBay, buying bulk pocket watches, and then literally just taking them apart with the tools he had on hand. And so, and actually, he's the one who, and I'm gonna throw this out there, but please don't overwhelm him with requests. He's the one that made these movement holders for me. He 3D printed these movement holders, and he was kind enough to. He actually did some really nice ones. I don't use them that much, but where he put what they're for right engraved right in, or printed right in the bottom of them. This one says 2824, so I know that's the specs for the ETA movement. And so, and I take the blame for getting him involved in this, because I asked him to print me some movement holders. So
actually, I'm gonna throw a suggestion towards John here. So there's a company, and maybe he's already familiar with them, called Shapeways, and you can upload your 3D models to their site, and they will and run a store right from Shapeways, almost like running an Etsy store. And basically, anyone who wants to can order for them to print and ship to you the model that was uploaded. So I've done that quite a few times with a guy named Watch Custom Mod on Instagram, who's a brilliant 3D designer. That's his primary profession, and he's done a bunch of watch components, including special fitment units that allows you to fit the Hattori movements into larger cases and things like that. But yeah, you can just, if you wanted to run a little store where you just uploaded your movement holders, and people buy them right from Shapeways, and then you get some cut of that, or some amount. I don't really know the logistics of it. I just know that that's one thing you can do, and I think it's kind of a nice thing. It's a way to be able to provide people with a service that you do without you actually having to 3D print billions of things every time someone asks.
Cool. Very cool. Very, very cool. All right.
So yeah.
So you want to set a second hand?
Let's do it.
Because that's the one that I see the most comments on. Now, I will say this. If you're setting second hands without one of these, a good 4-power loop and a headband for it, you're really doing yourself a massive disservice, because in 4 power is actually the optimal. It's the recommended power for watchmakers. Are you
saying 4?
4 power, and the reason being is that gives you, I believe it's a 2.5 inch standoff from whatever you're working on.
Oh, okay.
So on the top of this, it says 2.5. That's not 2.5 power. That's the standoff from the object that you're looking at. So this is actually a 4 power loop. And I use ASCO because my instructor says they are literally the best loop out there. He said they're better than Bergeon. And so, which to me, once I heard that, I was like, okay. And that's all I need to hear. And so, but our kit came with this one, and I bought another one. I bought a 5 power Bosch and Lom just to compare it. And he wasn't kidding. You don't get blurring around the edges, but I say that because I don't feel my way through setting a second hand. I actually watch the hub onto the pinion, so I know. Because early on, I actually had one occasion where I put the second hand and I pressed it in between the hub and the space, and I thought it was on because it was pretty tight until I tried to turn it and it wouldn't do anything. And then I looked at it closely under magnification and realized I actually pushed it into the gap, which bent the second hand pinion over to one side. So I essentially ruined the movement and damaged the hub all in one fell swoop. So now I like to actually see what I'm doing when I set a second hand. And I think that could be part of a lot of people's issue is they're just trying to do it by feel. And I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. If you've got enough money to keep replacing second hands and movements, then hey, that's great. But at this point in the build, I'm all in. I'm committed at this point. I've got a dial and a movement, and the dial feet are cut and filed down. I've got my hour and minute hand set exactly how I want them. I've reached, basically in military terminology, I've reached the bingo point. There is no turning back at this point. And so I don't want the second hand to cause a catastrophic failure. And so I'm going to shut up and put a second hand on here, because I'm going to focus on what I'm doing. You guys can narrate or whatever, talk about what you want to talk about.
Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic.
Yes.
Peanuts are neither a pea or a nut.
Legumes. Yeah.
So yeah, that I agree 100%. I think Jim will concur that when you're first starting out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how long did you take, Eugene, the first time you did this, put a second hand on? I think it took me about 2 hours.
Yeah, easily. And actually, the thing I remember the first time I did it is the amount of time it took me to do the hands, the second hand, and then putting the watch together and then going, well, why the hell did this thing stop? And then realizing that the second hand had gotten caught on the minute hand, because obviously I did a half-ass job of it, and then having to take the whole thing, back apart. Yeah, it's definitely talking about the experience thing, because it's funny, right? Because you really do, the muscle memory really does develop as you do it over time.
Yeah, I don't find hands that daunting anymore. I hate filing down stems. Hands, yeah, I don't find them such a worry anymore. But yeah, those few times, it's like hours every time, just trying to get that little pin to line up. And as well, I find that some second hands are a lot easier than others. I think this one would probably be quite difficult, that we're using here, because it's got that sort of counterweight on the back, and they don't seem to like the balance on the pin very well. They've got quite a bit of weight at both ends, but yeah.
Right, yeah, you gotta let it's being able to make it sit just right is like a whole thing.
I've done that thing as well where I've managed to push it in the gap, and I got away with it. But it's useful.
Or you think it's good, right? And then all of a sudden, and somehow, I mean, if you push it in the gap, and it's like a hacking movement, and you push the stem in, sometimes you can still get it to go somehow around the face, thinking that it's all good to go, and then until you flip it over and the thing just pops right out.
Yeah, totally. This thing I've learned about setting hands in general is just, if there's the slightest thing you're not happy about, you take them off and you start again. Hope for the best. Yeah. It's just painful. And there's a second hand floating around your case.
And that's that happens. It's that's the thing too. Like talking about how there are so many aftermarket products and all that, and these things are manufactured so precise. That you think, this says that it's made for this movement, and then it pops right on and just goes flying around like something that goes flying around
like a boomerang.
Boomerang, yeah, there we go. Couldn't come up with a clever enough thought there.
I knew where you were going. I've been there. Yeah, totally.
So, but yeah, I was gonna say, was there anything else that we wanted to?
How did you guys come up with the dial in the first place?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So like as we said before, the group. Actually, why don't we do a little bit more background on this whole project? So, like we said, we kind of came together. Initially, the thought was, it's like, hey, people are there's people producing this stuff, but it's all kind of like, well, let's make this dial that's just a recreation of this, or let's make, here's a dial that's a recreation of this, or like it's a Seamaster dial, but for Seiko and all this stuff. and we thought, like, why don't we try to make something, that's just unique? We weren't thinking like, what's the market share on this? We were just like, let's just make something unique, and so we reached out to everyone. We got like a bunch of us together, and initially, so there's 5 of us, the Cinco Mentes, but there was actually briefly initially a 6th beetle in the group. It was actually the Feeble Wrist on Instagram, and I think he's the one that initially was like, let's do a loomed dial, and then and then it kind of went from there, and I don't even remember how the colors thing came up. We definitely wanted something that was military inspired. One of us, a gentleman by the name of Fernando, is basically addicted to military watches and military inspired watches. We've been trying to have an intervention with him, but it's just to no avail. It's like literally every other day, it's like, guys, they bought another one. It's like, why didn't you stop me? And just before I forget, we got a question from Daniel Neal. He's wondering if you've ever done any heat bluing of hands. Yourself, Zeke, or I guess I haven't, but I've known some people who have, to varying degrees of success. I've seen some heat rainbowing, where you try to get blue, but you get this kind of rainbow colors, which is cool in its own right, but it's not the desired result.
I have not. No, I don't alter the hands. I just put them on.
I just stick them on, but anyway, so yeah, so the idea behind the military kind of feel is that like, so the old military hand dials used to indicate that they were luminous, either with tritium, and then they'd have that letter T on there, or later when tritium fell out of favor, they would just have an L to indicate that the dial was luminous. So they had this, like, they had the information that it basically they wanted to share with the wearer. And then they would have like the MOD, the Ministry of Defense arrow, the crow's foot, which Jim might be a little bit more aware of, but I believe goes all the way back to like the 17th century. And it actually stood for like an arrow, and it was the Royal Ministry of Defense mark.
Yeah, the broad arrow.
Yeah, it was very much. It used to basically say this belongs to the government.
So you had to return it. Technically, you had to return it, right? Like any of that stuff that was marked with the broad arrow, you had to give back to the queen or king.
Yeah. So it's a sign it had been issued, and that's one of the reasons why I quite wanted to not just put a broad arrow on there, sort of do something a bit more stylized, because you're not trying to sort of pretend this is a watch that was issued then, but you are sort of referring to it and sort of harking back to it. And now, did you see the? I think it's the latest Bond Omega Seamaster, and they put one on the dial on that, and I thought that was maybe just a bit cheeky. You know what I mean?
I definitely thought it was too. I gotta say, I mean, I think that is just. I think that's the most attractive Seamaster that I've seen in a long time. Yeah. I think it's just a beautiful design, and Omega. In contrast to a brand like Rolex, who's kind of, they're often seen as the yin and yang of Swiss watchmaking these days, are a massive, massive producer of watches, right? So they kind of they get their kind of the excitement in people by making all these kind of like limited editions, kind of like Seiko does in many ways.
They're the Swiss Seiko.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In many ways, I think too, because Omega, while other watch brands, other Swiss watch brands, were really focusing kind of on the watch in front of them. so to speak. Let's make this one a chronometer. Let's do, Omega was developing manufacturing techniques that could allow them to produce very large numbers of incredibly high precision watches, which is why, like, if you, it's not great for their value retention necessarily of a watch, but that's not what a company is worried about, right? They're trying to produce as many quality products as possible, and what Omega was doing in the 60s was precisely that. They were coming up with manufacturing techniques that allowed them to produce very high number of very high precision watches, which I think is really cool. It's kind of, I have a bit of a thing for Omega, and if, in a similar way that I do for Seiko, I think, and it's the forward looking kind of elements of the industry.
Omega did the marine chronometer. I mean, that's a feat. That's a marvel. That's a marvel of manufacturing in and of itself. The Omega marine chronometer. It's why they're a timekeeper for the Olympics and have been for so long. So we're at the casing point. Hands are on. Hands are good. I had to do a little work on the second hand. This is the second set of those hands I've gotten, and I guess 1 out of 2 sets weren't bad, but the hub on the second hand was too large, so I had to shrink it a little bit with my magical hand hub shrinking tool. That will forever remain a secret. But I have the case now. I do understand that earlier, this is the case I've chosen for the build. It's a Doucette Alexander James's PVD coated case. And I went ahead. I didn't realize I was going to use this case for this build until I went back and forth between a 3 o'clock and a 4 o'clock crown. Originally, I was going to use an SMK case. But I decided on this one because I thought this black would look really good with the black hands and the black markers on the dial. And so I went ahead and pressed the crystal. And now the sapphire crystal has a light green hue to it, which won't come through. I hear a lot about, it's this tinted color, but very rarely do I ever actually can my eyes ever actually perceive that difference. And so, but there was a question about earlier, something about getting something off of the inside of the crystal. Is that? Yeah,
getting dust off the inside of the crystal, making sure, because they tend to find ways to collect dust even when you're being at your cleanest.
Hand bellows, and I use to make sure the last thing that I do to it is I use these Zeiss lens cleaning wipes. They're for cameras. And nobody wants a dirty camera lens. And so I picked these up at Walmart. And right now, I mean, for the last 6 months, Walmart's had them on clearance. So I literally buy them by the box of 100.
Are they these sort of paper type?
Yeah, they're moistened paper. I suspect that they're essentially alcohol, but because it has that smell. But so I'll give that's the last thing that I'll do to the crystal after I give it a good blowing out. And I always want to blow away from my work. I don't want to just move the dust from the case onto the case back or the movement or something else. So I'm always blowing away from my work. But and then anyone who's ever done this knows you start to get into a mental debate on whether or not what I'm seeing is on the inside of the crystal or is it on the outside of the crystal. And then you flip it over and you're like, well, no, now I can't see it, so it must be on the outside. And then, right before you put the movement in it or onto the movement, you start to second guess yourself again. And so, because, this hand bellows, it's drawing in air from the room. So if there's dust in the air, this is going to draw dust in. And then you're just going to blow the dust back out. So there's only so much you can do unless you have a vacuum system like you would find at the bench at a large service center like Rolex or Swatch Group. They actually have vacuum hanging above their bench that they can just literally pull down and brush over parts, and it just sucks any dust or anything away. But I have gotten this as clean as I can get it. So I'm going to go ahead and use my casing cushion. I unscrewed the crown because we have that fun coming up. I've unscrewed the crown. I have to, now this is one thing that I struggled with early on, was getting the, because we all know with this movement, the crown, the building crown has to be pushed in to be able to pull it out. And so how do you get that out? Well, you know, I did a lot of different stupid things. I would press on the lever with my teeth, or I press on the little detent and then pull the crown out with my teeth, and, you know, just all kinds of stuff that probably not, you know, if you did it at work, someone would look at you funny and be like, you know, I'm not exactly sure what you're doing to that customer's watch, but, you know, so now I just try to use the bench to help me get the crown out. And if I had watched this video, you know, a year ago, I'd have been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that easily, because that guy must be a Jedi or something. And it's really just lots and lots and lots of practice. And so casing this thing up, let's see if my gamble paid off on the color scheme. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's looking pretty nice. I like it's got a, I mean, it's just very, it's got that tool. It's got like a unity of purpose kind of a thing going for it.
Yeah, I kind of like the black numerals, the black hands, the black case. That's kind of what I was going for.
Yeah,
I'm pretty.
I think it's the first time I've seen someone put Mercedes hands on one of these as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I was thinking about that before.
Yeah, but now that's all come together really nice.
Outstanding. All right, so let's do another sexy part that everyone who's done this before, you know, just revels in. They're like, oh yay, it's time to cut the winding stem and then file it down and hope I didn't cut it too short.
Oh, that's and I think I mean, to my credit or whatever, I think I've done that once.
Really? I've got a little box full of them.
But like that one time was enough to just like for things to go flying across the room.
I was gonna say I've got a whole box of ones that are cut short that I could send you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd say this is the first time you're doing this. A good investment is to buy a few spare.
Yeah.
Each 36 stems. Have them handy.
Yes.
So cut them longer.
Exactly. And I almost pre-cut this, but then I thought, no, that would rob everyone of the experience of seeing me, you know, fumble around with cutting a watch stem. And yeah.
I was going to say one thing while you're kind of getting that in there. The one thing I noticed with the crystals, with the tinted crystals, is that the tint, whether it's blue or whatever, obviously it shows up at certain angles and at certain lights. But I noticed that with a white dial, you're actually less. You don't see it as well with a white dial as you do with the black, because of how the black reflects. I think it has something to do with the reflection, but I noticed that because I've done a few watches with a white dial where I've used blue tinted double dome crystal, and you can't see the tint as well on a white dial as you do on a black one.
It's interesting. Must have something to do with color spectrum, because I know that the colors we see, when we see something and it looks black to us, it's actually every color but black. Black is the only color that's reflected off of it.
Right.
And so that's very interesting. I wonder if it has something to do with that. There we go.
Actually, I didn't think about that, but yeah. But anyway, sorry. Back to the stem there.
That's all right. I'm just making sure that my hunch was correct, that all of the debris that I'm seeing, I'm gonna get these this wipe out and go over the outside of the crystal one time, because I want to make sure that any of the little spots I'm seeing on the outside, before I go any further, I don't want to run the risk of having spots on the outside, or having spots on the crystal on the inside, because I'm going to be wearing this the rest of the day, so it will just drive me nuts. Plus, you train as you fight, so that means.
So we've got sorry,
no, go ahead.
There, we got a question from Daniel Neal about if we figured out how to unscrew stock glued Seiko stem from a crown. And actually, if you've got a torch lighter or some sort of a torch, just heating up the stem just a little bit allows the metal to expand and then contract to break the seal of either the either the Loctite or what have you, whatever was used on there. And then you can just kind of, you have to be careful because you don't want to damage the stem. You want to grab it kind of by the threads, and then you can unscrew the crown off of the stem. At least that's been my experience with it.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially if it's a spring-loaded crown as well. You got to be very careful not to destroy the clutch by trying to brute force it off. Grab it by the actual the section of the crown that actually goes into or rather the stem goes into, spin it at that point there.
Right, exactly. And if it's used, and if they used, if I assume Seiko or whoever would use something like Loctite, that would be the appropriate thing to use on a thread. Then if you actually look at a bottle of Loctite on the back, it gives you that instruction to heat up the whatever it is to loosen the Loctite. If it's some sort of other adhesive, that might be a different story. But anything factory should just be coming with Loctite, which should allow you to remove it with heat.
Heat it up.
Just toss it in the oven. It's all good.
Yeah. This thing is giving me fits. I'm trying to get the stem completely center in the winding hole.
Oh,
in
yeah.
the tube, and it's bouncing. It keeps popping back and forth on me. It's like just the slightest little pressure, and I've gone too far the other way. I've never had this happen before. Yeah, see? It just popped right past where I need to be. Little stinker. Probably because I need to use the loo, and that's all I can think about. So before I make a mistake, I'm going to take a break. If you guys could entertain, I'm going to take a break and use the loo. And I will be back as soon as possible. But I do want to point something out. I am going to put the back on this, but before I do that, I am going to clean the inside of the back. I'm going to use my moistened wipe, my moist towelette I got from McDonald's when I ordered my barbecue sandwich. Not really.
And that's a great reason just to order barbecue sandwiches.
Yes, I mean, if you're an aspiring, watch builder or watch, repair person or just a general watch mechanic, you should be eating a lot of barbecue sandwiches so that you can get the McRib, so that you can get the moist towelettes to keep your crystals clean. Wow. Wonder how many people are going to take that seriously and leave a comment later and be like, I can't believe it, and because that's the beauty of YouTube.
My watches are incredibly clean, but my cholesterol's through the roof.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, welcome to the club.
But Daniel, I think there actually are some Seiko. I don't think the current ones are, but I think there have been some in the past that do that were where the crown was permanently attached to the stem. And I don't know if you've seen that, Jim, but I think that is the case in some of them.
Yeah, the SKX 13 small SKX. It's certainly true. I found that anyway. I have to get a new crown from Crystal Times. For
Right.
that one.
Right, and I don't know if it might be some other ones too, but that's the one where I've run into it. Where what happens is you try to spin it, twist it off, and at first you think you got it, but then you realize you just broke whatever it is, and now it just spins freely inside the crown, and you're just screwed there.
Yeah, I didn't even try. I read that happens. Just ordered another one. But, I guess it's probably just. I think it's more of a manufacturing decision on their part, or something they could automate by doing it that way rather than just trying to stop people changing crowns.
Right, it's probably just easier to stamp them right in there like that than it is to screw them on. But yeah, Dan says it's in the SKX 779, which I'm actually not familiar with that reference.
I'm googling it.
Google.
Oh, okay, it's the SKX which had the full steel bezel on it.
Oh, hang on a second. Now I gotta Google.
Yeah, you don't see them so much.
Oh yeah. That's the one that. So Fernando, one of the Mentis, made a fantastic Soxa mod using that baby monster. I think it's the baby monster. Or it's one of the monsters in any case. But man, I love his mod. If you are out there listening and go to DIY Watch and Strap on Instagram, or look up Fernando Alvarez, you can see his awesome monster Soxa build. It really is like like it's cemented as one of my favorite Soxa builds. Really, in my mind, it's pretty great.
Yeah, that was a really nice job.
We'll get. I was going to say, and Jim, you're the one who actually designed the logo, because we can talk about that. We wanted a broad arrow, but I think you at some point were like, "Hey, what if we did this thing?" And you just threw the WhatsApp, you threw us the image of the two Fs back to back, looking like both a Firefly and a broad arrow, and being two Fs at the same time, which was just a stroke of genius. And hopefully, when Zeke gets back, he can show the actual logo so we can kind of appreciate it a bit. But yeah, that I thought was really cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember you were trying to draw like a sort of stylized Firefly, like a stickman Firefly sort of thing.
Right.
I sort of saw it in that, I think, and then I found on an app on my phone, I've got that sort of which one is it? I think it's Adobe or something like that, where you can actually draw a mirror image. So whatever you draw on one side draws on the other side mirror image. So I was just able to throw that together very quick. But yeah, no, it's quite, because the name Firefly came first, really, talking about the loom.
Yeah.
And then sort of the FF sort of came from that, and then it all just sort of came together, didn't it? It's like serendipity.
Yeah, it really did, and it's and then the way the design set. I think I think one of the things that I really appreciated about this whole project was that how much what turned out would not have been if just if any one, or maybe even four of us. I mean, this was really the five of us, coming together, giving ideas, redesigning, changing the fonts and everything, just to kind of get it to where we wanted it to be. And I thought that's kind of one of my favorite elements of this, is the collaboration element.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we talked about fonts a lot. I remember talking about fonts a great deal, because the font almost as a sort of a nod to history, so the dial, the font really defines what age it would have been, if it was a real historical dial. And I think that font, it was more of a sort of, would you say 50s or 40s sort of style font that we settled on in the end? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of got that 40s and 50s kind of feel to it. Because I think at one point, we tried out a one that had a little bit more curvy kind of more 20s, 30s look, but that did not go. It's one of my favorite eras of watches is that, and maybe in the future we could look at doing something with more of that like 30s flair, but this really just there's a very straightforward, it brings its meaning across without any question, like a military dial should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Hey, Zeke, do you want to, if or when you're ready, do you want to show off that show the dial a little closer so we can see the Firefly, the FF logo?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm putting new finger Cots on, so as soon as I get them, get my work area here. Yeah, and I apologize because my web camera is showing everything in reverse, so it'll be backwards, but let's see if we can get this to focus. I think I have to tilt it
It's
a little.
coming through correctly on my screen.
Is it?
Yeah. You got this lightning bolt of reflection right in front.
Yeah, it's my light. It's the overhead lighting. There we go.
Yeah.
Ah, there it is.
That's it.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and I love how you split the broad arrow to create the two Fs for Firefly. That's just awesome. And what actually caught my attention first was I was a huge fan of the TV show Firefly. And I was like, oh my gosh, they made a dial, for Firefly. I've got to check this out. And then I realized, wait a minute, it has absolutely nothing to do with Firefly. And so, but by that point I was hooked. And so, the first loom shot I saw, and so.
It's funny because Daniel's asking, is that enamel? So that's the luminous coating, because the dial is fully loomed. So it's a luminous coating that has this kind of a really interesting eggshell kind of finish. But a number of people have asked if that was enamel. I think it looks really slick.
I don't know. I have a lot of ambient light in here. I'm not sure if we're going to get a full on loom shot, but. I mean, I lost when I turned my two bench lights off, I lost absolutely no visibility of the dial. I mean, it's still fully visible. Come on. It'll get there. Or it won't.
Just throw one of your loops over the camera.
Oh, that actually, I did that with my phone one time during a chat with someone, and it actually worked. It magnified. I need to get something dark to put behind it so that it has more of a focal distance correction. I don't know. Anyway, we know what we're trying to do. So, yeah. amazing loom, and I will on Instagram when this is done. I'll definitely post I'll find a dark closet and I'll post a loom shot of what the hands and the dial came together to look like. Now I have to cut my crown. So for that, I'm going to get my calipers out here.
Measure it up.
Measured up. Measured it 3 times. Cut it twice, and it's still too short.
I think every video I've ever seen of this done on YouTube, they never use a spring-loaded crown. So I don't think I've ever seen how it's supposed to be done properly with spring-loaded crown.
So basically, I always measure from the inside edge of the crown to the very first thread, and that gives me my jumping off point. So I know I need to cut 6.79 millimeters off of the winding stem, and so to get me in the ballpark where I want to be. And so and then I may have to fine tune it just a little bit, because the crown is going to obviously, as you're alluding to, it's going to compress into the threads. So
you measured from?
I measured from the edge, the outer edge of the tube, winding stem tube, to the edge of the flat face of the crown.
Okay.
Right, so because the crown's going to compress when it screws down.
Yes, yes. Now it won't compress enough, but that gives me a starting point. And so,
right. And then from there, do you usually just file from there?
Yes. I only cut stems one time. Now here's another tip for anyone who's new, because I've seen this done on videos before. So if you look, I don't know how much of this you can actually see, but you see wherever the threads end, you don't ever clamp onto anything past that point to the tip that goes into the watch, because all of those little ledges and edges and chamfers and areas are meant to interact with the setting and winding mechanisms, what Watch Repair Channel calls the keyless works. And you don't want to incidentally end up marring or damaging that part of the winding stem. So you always grasp it with your pliers before to cut it on the threaded portion of the stem. I can't stress that enough. I have a pair here, and I will just grasp it up against the shoulder, and I always grasp it by the threaded portion, because I'm going to end up putting oil on that part of the stem. I'm going to get to that here in a second. I'm going to end up putting very minute amounts of oil on that part of the stem, because it comes from the factory dry, but it's not supposed to go into the watch dry. And so I have to oil that in very specific areas. And if it's damaged, it's not going to hold the oil, and it will not interact with the inner workings of the watch very well. And so I won't get that nice crisp, pop out when you get done unscrewing it. We all love that, how when you unscrew it, it's unscrewed because it springs out. And if it's damaged or it's not oiled properly, you may at first, but it won't take long before that metal on metal inside the watch begins to wear, and you'll end up with a damaged winding stem, or worse yet, a damaged keyless works. So I'm going to go ahead.
Right. That was one of the things I remember talking about Clock Savant on Instagram. He did a repair on an Oris winter date that was relatively new, but had like metal shavings in it because the keyless works and the clutch and everything weren't oiled, weren't lubricated properly, and basically started grinding. And on those ETA movements, the hand winding, I think is one of the vulnerabilities in the first place. So when those are not lubricated properly, you can shorten the life of the movement tremendously.
Absolutely, yeah. And then your watch is a year old, and you're wondering why it's in the shop. And it's like, well, because it wasn't. And I haven't seen very many of the didn't quite take enough off, but that's okay. I'd rather not have taken enough off than taken too much. I don't want to dig into my stash of spare stems. But I don't see very many people on the channels that do this kind of stuff, actually oiling the winding stem when they put it in. They just, it's brand new, I'll just put it in. And so I don't use a file. I use a sharpening stone, an India stone,
actually I do too,
to take the burrs off, just enough to where the crown will thread on. So, and then I want to make sure I blow it off real good because I don't want to have any debris left on that part of the stem, or the whole stem completely. So, and so now let me thread the stem on, and we'll see how far we still have to go. We shouldn't be terribly far away, but I'm going to hold it with pliers because it's a little bit tricky to get it started the first time after you've cut it, even after you've deburred it. So
it says so. Jared said HP 1300. Is that the lubricant they're using for the
Yep.
stem?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have my oiling pot and my black Bergeon oiler. It's off camera right now. It's just I wanted to minimize what was in camera, so it's just off camera. I'm gonna take the back off so I can see what I don't want to jam this into, just jam it into the movement. So let's have okay, so that's popped out. See if we catch threads. And this is actually kind of a pain to do with finger cots on, because the finger cots want to grab onto the crown, and it's long enough, but I think it's still too long. I still think I need to take some off of it. Yeah, I need to take a little bit. I would say probably another millimeter to millimeter and a half off of the length to get it to catch the threads and thread on. So, but I don't want to. I'm going to do this part I am going to do with a file, because I don't want to be here all day with a sharpening stone. So, and I'm going to use my pliers sort of as a guide. And so, yes, HP 1300 is what you use on, or what we've been trained to use on most of the jewels in the watch. There's very few jewels that use anything other than HP 1300. It is a really, really good viscosity for most of your pivots on your train of wheels. You're going to use your thicker oils on your mainspring because it has the most amount of torque. And then as you progressively move away from your torque source, which is your mainspring, towards your balance wheel, your oils get thinner because you have much less torque as you get closer to your balance wheel, and your escapement has very little torque. So you want very lightweight oils on that. And so,
with the least amount of viscosity, kind of where there's going to be, because that balance wheel is going to spin oscillate quite a bit.
Yeah, it oscillates, and it needs to be able to oscillate without, if you're using the wrong oil, you're going to create friction, and friction is one of the enemies of isochronism. So, or chronometry, isochronism is the correct term. So.
So you're using a higher viscosity oil, you said, on the barrel pivots, right?
Yes.
And then you use the same oil for your train and your balance wheel pivot.
The balance wheel gets a slightly the balance wheel gets a slightly lighter oil.
Okay.
But like your whole keyless works, or your setting mechanism or winding mechanism, whatever school you're from, whatever term that's used, it's gonna use the same oil as. Okay, so we can see now I've still got about another, that's screwed in as far as I'm comfortable screwing it in, because I don't want to damage the movement. So I still have about a millimeter to go between that crown and the case to get that crown set into the recess in the case. So I should have one more go at this, and then I can go ahead and apply the oil. But I got a good solid, it popped out nice and solid. So
All right, so we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there. We've almost got a watch.
That's the danger, isn't it? You always rush this bit. Be careful.
Yeah,
You're so
that's
close to
that's
putting on
the
your race
difference. That's the difference. It really is. I mean, that's you hit it right on the head. This is the part where someone who probably should be, digging holes in the backyard rather than building watches because they don't have the patience. And it's, we're talking, I'm probably going to do less than 10 strokes with a file to get that millimeter off.
Do you use a diamond file?
I use Nicholson files.
Mhm.
All the files that we use in school are Nicholson. They have excellent cutting teeth, but we're taught how to haft them ourselves. We put our own handles on them, and so because we're trained that every file should have a handle. You don't use a file without a handle. It's only a partial tool. So
is that primarily for control?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely. A larger outer diameter gives you more control. It's like trying to wind the difference between winding a watch with an onion crown and then like an SNK crown. That large aviator onion crown you have way more control of. So, all right, let's see where we've landed on this. Okay, so I'm betting that's right because I don't see a gap now when it's pushed all the way in. I don't see a gap between the threads and the crown itself, which means we have the total amount of compression for the crown left to screw in. So, and I would say that's it. I don't know. Let's try to get this so you guys can see it. And it's not going to happen. It's the actual crown is making contact with the side of the case, screwed in.
Yeah, you don't see light.
Nope, no daylight between the crown and the case. So that's what I was shooting for. And now when I unscrew it, I want to make sure that as I unscrew it, I get that nice clean pop when there it was, nice clean popped out. So now I'm going to introduce my oiler. And first, I'm going to clean my area. We're always.
What's his name?
What's that? my oiler.
I was being.
My oiler.
You said you were going to introduce your oiler, so I was like,
yes. This is Frankie. This is Frankie. He's my oiler. I use the black Bergeon oiler, which is the smallest oiler. It gives me the most amount of control. Now, here's another thing that most people that are new that haven't done anything, they think, okay, you buy the oiler, it's ready to use. It's actually not. You have to commission the oiler. Just like when you buy a set of screwdrivers, the blade tips are not ready to use. You have to actually reshape them to the proper ratio. A screwdriver blade should be the sides that we talked about earlier, the facets on a screwdriver blade, the facet, the shiny part, should be 30% longer than the diameter of the shaft. So if this is a 1.0, which this obviously isn't, but if it was a 1.0, then you would want a 1.3 millimeter, or I mean if it was a 1.0, you would want a millimeter, 1.1 millimeter length on that facet. And they don't come that way, except Bergeon. I actually mic'd my Bergeon screwdrivers, and they were perfectly proportioned. But I still had to clean up the web, the bottom portion here, that actually makes contact, because another thing most people don't realize is when you put a watch screwdriver into a screw, the tip of it should never touch the bottom of the screw.
It should wedge itself in, essentially.
Essentially, yes. All of the work with the screwdriver should be done with the edges here and here, not with the flat end of the screwdriver. Contrary to how we use screwdrivers in normal everyday life. Same thing with the oiler. The oiler has to be commissioned. You have to polish the tip of your oiler so that the oil will stay in the proper place on the oiler. Otherwise, the oil will migrate And this is where the Rodico comes in, because in between using the oiler, I'm going to be cleaning. And I'm not gonna go too deep into what I'm doing here, because it gets really deep really quick, and it's not the fun part. So I'm gonna just remove the stem. I'm going to take the cap off my oiler. I'm just gonna put the oil where it belongs, and then we'll put that stem in. And yeah, that's the I don't even think that's gonna show up on camera, the tip of that oiler. Oh yeah. To put it in perspective, that's the diameter of the stem. Wait a minute. Yeah, there's the shiny is the diameter. Boy, this is a little more difficult than I was thinking. I wanted to give some perspective to the size of the oiler versus the stem. And most people consider the stem small. There you go.
Oh yeah, there we go.
That's the tip of the oiler. So microscopic. So I'm going to go ahead and get my oil. And that's all the oil I should need for this. In school, they have a saying: if you can't see it, you got something. If you can see it, you don't got something. Basically, essentially meaning, you have to train your eye. Your eyes have to be trained to see the proper amount of oil. And we're talking about, you don't actually see the oil. I'll give you an example. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to actually get some oil out of the oiler. And you tell me if you can see when it actually gets the oil. Okay. So I'll open it up. I have oil on the end of my oiler.
Huh.
Yep. That's another thing you spend hours at school doing, is practicing actually getting the proper amount of oil on your oilers.
Yeah, that really is a whole nother world of things, because aside from assembling watches, having had a chance to just kind of play around with some old movements and then watching, like, once again, people like Mark Lovick and some other guys do it, and that moment when you realize that the amount of time that it takes to get that kind of, the experience, to get the skill, get just the right amount of oil is just.
I spent the first week of class learning how to sharpen my screwdrivers. The entire first week, 8-hour days sharpening screwdrivers.
Wow.
Till every single one of my screwdrivers was perfect. So I would sharpen, I would work on the stone with the screwdriver. Then I would go up to the front, have the instructor look at it. He would tell me where the defects were. I would go back and he would make sure I could actually see the defects, because it doesn't do any good to say, oh no, it's wrong, and then go back and work on it more, because you could just further exacerbate what you've done wrong. So, he wants to make sure he's, communicating to us where the defect is. The web isn't perpendicular to the shaft, or one of your facets is longer than the other. And so, in doing that, he always wants to communicate. So, oh yeah, that's so smooth. That's one thing about these NH35s, is when they're right, they feel so good. It really just. So last thing we're gonna do, well, next to last thing, is we're going to go ahead and put some silicone on our gasket, because we do want some measure of water resistance. Not that this is not that this is a diver, but I consider this case and especially the dial design to be a very field watch look. And I always want to make sure that it's gonna hold up to, if you slipped and fell into a creek when you're walking around, or in the watch is completely submerged, or you get caught in the middle of a pouring rainstorm. That's one of my pet peeves. And I know that they say, and I've heard it time and time again, well, a screw down crown doesn't make a watch water resistant. There's plenty of watches that, don't have a screw down crown that are water resistant. And while that's true, that's true. I see the fact that, it's the gaskets that make the watch water resistant. There's just something about a field watch to me that doesn't have a screw down crown. I just don't get it. And so it's like, it's not that hard to put a screw down tube into the case instead of just a regular smooth push pull tube.
Right. I mean, it's that extra layer of protection, right? But it's true. I mean, if you look through history, I mean, it wasn't until really the 40s and 50s that the whole concept of the screw down crown started to get really standardized. But there were plenty of waterproof watches before that, not waterproof, water resistant watches that didn't, that just had different kinds of gaskets, like the
right
gasket and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the screw down, I mean, it just provides that extra bit of it's dust resistance. It's it does protect more. And that's kind of the
I got rid of a Hamilton quote unquote field watch just because it was a push pull crown, and I did not want to change the crown tube to a screw down crown because I couldn't get a Hamilton screw down crown because their whole line of field watches are push pull crowns. And I'm like, what? Oh, it just grated on me. So now to complete, this isn't the actual strap. The strap won't be here till Wednesday, but in the meantime, I'm going to use this strap. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Archer watch straps. I absolutely love them. They're the quick release buckle, or they're the quick release tabs. Somebody used spring bars, quick release spring bars. I was hoping somebody would bail me out there so I didn't look like a moron. I love how you guys both just sat there silently.
Some eligible wood, and I didn't know.
Everybody just kind of clammed up. Yeah.
In watchmaking school, we call these the flobouchets.
Right there, you go. Yeah. There we go. Or I'd have to use the German term, which literally means bar made from. Its literal interpretation is bar made from steel with spring to hold strap to watch case, and it's 2 pages long, but it's still just one word. So
one word, yeah. Well, it's German, right? So it'd be like
there you go. So that's the look that I was going for.
Oh, hey, I like that.
Yeah, works well.
Yeah. I wanted it to be utilitarian.
Archer, yeah, I'm not familiar with the Archer straps. Man, I think all the straps should come with quick release spring bars. I don't know if there's it's just like, no matter how careful you are, you still manage sometimes to gash at the lugs, especially if you haven't been trained to sharpen your screwdrivers for an entire week.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. Plus, I mean, am I the only one who literally sometimes halfway through the day decides this watch would look really good on a black strap and want to change strap midday?
Right. I mean, and that's why a lot of times we end up kind of falling to the NATOs, right? Because you can just pop them right out. But, I mean, midday, sometimes 2 in the morning.
Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, this would look great on a brown strap. I should try a brown strap. And, instead of having to get a tool and everything, with these spring bars, and I use different brands. I've used Barton. I've used Archer. There's one more. They're principally all Amazon retailers. Barton, Richter, I think, is the other one that I used. And I started out with the silicone because I loved, and originally I was going to put this on a silicone strap. But what I've got a NATO strap with black hardware coming. That's a little lighter color than this. Not much. It's not quite sand. It's just a little lighter color than that, and that's what's going to go on this. So
So that's coming through as green for me. Is that?
Yeah, it's like an olive drab.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an olive drab. So it's definitely got that military utilitarian feel to it. And then I think what's really cool is having that lone red accent at the top of the dial. It's the only color really on the watch. Everything else is very monochromatic. And then you've got, I'm taking my finger cots off now so I can actually.
You know, the one thing that popped into my head earlier, looking at the color scheme, I was like, I wonder what it would look like on a white rubber strap, like a fitted, curved end white rubber diver strap. I mean, it would definitely make it go away from the military theme. That would be much more California styling or something like that. But it was just a thought that popped into my head.
Yeah, I don't know. If I had one, I'd throw it on there, but I don't because I'm not in California. So yeah, that red, that one little bit of red just really. Okay, you're gonna focus. I'll stay here all day until you focus. How about that?
I'll make you should focus.
Okay, I know what
I like the white. I like the white gasket as well.
Around the bezel.
Yeah.
See, I thought I was gonna catch flack for that, but apparently I'm not. There we go.
Yeah, actually. Oh, wow, there we go. No, actually, you're right, Jim. We mentioned the whole white gasket thing before, but in this case, especially, the white gasket really kind of creates a nice accent.
Yeah.
There we go. Stop moving.
I know.
No, I'm kidding. It's webcams are not really.
I don't have a Canon 6000 A plus setup. I'm just using a Logitech webcam. So
every time that second head moves, it messes up all of the
the focus.
Yeah, it's you should get the Watchfinder and Co.uk setup.
Yeah, I'd love to see it behind the scenes with that setup because that's incredible.
We were talking about that earlier. How his camera, his setup is so high def that you can see like imperfections on Patek Philippe.
Oh man, yeah.
Watches.
If anyone doubts that, go back and watch some of the videos on Audemars and Patek and some of the other companies, because you will actually, his camera is so high def that you will see imperfections in the paint on the hands. And I've actually seen dust on the dial. And having looked at enough watches through a loop, you sort of develop an eye to be able to see, okay, that's on the dial. Nope, that's on the crystal. Because he's constantly moving the watches around. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they would send a sample out that, had that level of an imperfection for a $96,000 watch. So
it's true, but it's there.
So we're all happy because now I have a watch that I can wear for the rest of the day. And now I just wish, I think I know what I can do. Because I really want to see Loom.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think what I'll do, a little bit, I don't know how much this is going to block, but I want to
see if we got it charged up well.
Well, I gotta get it really dark in here. That's my challenge is. Let me find something because there's a window right behind my bench, and so I can work with a lot of ambient light. And so I got to find something real quick that I can hang over that window that just destroys the ambient light.
Destroy the light.
Destroy the light.
So you'll be getting an email from Fernando soon trying to buy that.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Hey, as long as you can offer him a deal, that's the trick.
Oh, actually, this one would cost more because this was built live on YouTube. So,
there you go.
So this watch
Well,
is a
it's
one
rare.
of a
It's
kind,
rare.
and it's yeah. I mean, there's no you can't replicate it because this is the one that was built on YouTube live. So it would come with a certificate that said actually hand built by Mr. Zeke on YouTube live on this date. So yeah.
In fact, the certificate can be done live on YouTube. You got the piece of paper right there. Just scribble right on there.
Yep. It's like proof of life. Yeah, so I think the price of it just doubled.
I was going to say throw back to the to the screw down crown discussion kind of thing, and Seiko releasing that 5KX and choosing to go with just a regular push crown,
push pull.
Now,
desk divers.
Obviously, you were talking about field watches and watches that are going to go through some sort of some sort of trials and tribulations and needing a really secure crown, and obviously for your average Joe, a push pull crown with good gaskets, it's more than sufficient to get you from your office and through the morning commute and whatever. So it's not necessary by any means, but it's still kind of unusual, I think, that Seiko decided to do that, to not just put in a threaded crown tube into that 5KX.
I think it has. I think. Well, what I think doesn't matter, but I see it as a very interesting marketing ploy to push people to the prospects line, because forever you could get an outstanding diver that would keep up with the likes of just about any diver at any price point out there, for the actual use of diving, for at the time, way back when, for literally $150. Yes, they've slowly creeped up, but say $250 or $275 or even $300. Well, now to go to Seiko to get an actual, PADI certified diver, you're going to spend
ISO rated.
Yeah, ISO rated. You're gonna spend $600 to $900. So it's actually not a bad idea for if you're Seiko. But
so it's essentially it's an act of sandbagging to an extent. They're intentionally knocking the rating down of their cheap. So it becomes a diver style watch. So if you want a diver, you're going to have to upgrade.
That's exactly it. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover everything with this raincoat that I picked up in Ireland a few years back.
The Irish raincoats really are the best,
Well, yeah. If you're gonna buy a raincoat, why wouldn't you buy an Irish? Well, see, now
I mean, Seattle's okay, but
well, Seattle is more like the newer Seiko. Yeah, I can't. I mean, you can see it, but the camera won't even focus now because it's dark.
We can always post some shots on the Insta.
Yeah,
page.
I have no problem taking pictures, and now I'm gonna point my camera all over the place. What did I do? Oh man, and it's let there be light. Okay.
So wait, so is Seiko still releasing the SRP Turtle? Because that's ISO rated, isn't it?
You got me. I'm not a diver. Diver.
Yeah.
I'm not a diver. I don't dive. I can't dive. My ears won't equalize. I wish I could. I did just a little bit in the Army, but not enough to even call myself a diver. So I would never want to represent myself as something I'm not. So, but I know that the SKX, I have friends who are divers, and I have friends with subs and Seamasters, and they dive with guys who have had the same Seiko diver for 25 years, and they have no problem whatsoever with diving with it, they don't even give it a second thought. And so now I have dust all over my bench. What have I done? Oh my gosh.
It's a day of work.
I'm going to try not to have a panic attack. I'm going to try not to break out in hives. So.
I mean, it's okay. The webcam probably won't pick that up anyway.
No, you won't be able to tell. my mottled, wrinkled skin. Yeah. That's why I never show my face. It's just my hands. So
I think what most, it's funny we were talking about diving. I mean, like, I think if there's people who are diving with watches, I think I would imagine most of them are diving with like G-Shocks or not talking about the ones who are like, who have their wrist strap diving computers or whatever. But I'm guessing most people are like using G-Shocks or.
Oh, you mean the myth so you're addressing essentially the myth of the, what brand is that? The Luminox, the official watch of the Navy SEALs.
Oh yeah, that's. Excuse me.
Yeah, I can tell you firsthand, Navy SEALs do not wear Luminox. They wear G-Shocks. Sunto or G-Shocks, one of the two. That's basically it. Black and white. I can tell you firsthand, they do not wear, Luminox. And it looks great in the movies, but when was the last time you heard you saw a Luminox with a audible countdown timer or an audible alarm or a stopwatch built into it? Oh, they don't have that. Oh, well, yeah, I can see how that'd be useful.
Right. It's like, I mean, if you're gonna you're gonna have the most advanced equipment that can help you accomplish what what you need, right?
Yeah.
And it's right. Those field watches, those great field watches that we love, like the CWCs and although CWC I think still does issue the G10. I think that still gets issued to the Royal
Ministry of Defense.
Ministry of MOD,
I think it got swapped out for a was it a Timex or
for an Armatron?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes sense, right? I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when these were the most advanced technology for keeping accurate time, it made perfect sense, that would be a standard issued equipment, but once Quartz showed up, the official pilot watch was that Seiko Quartz chronograph. It wasn't, it wasn't
it wasn't an Air King? Oh, say it ain't so.
It wasn't the GMT Master or whatever. No.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this is more precise, more accurate, and lasts longer.
That's because our expectation level changed. It's the same thing that happened when we went from cooking in the oven to cooking in the microwave. As our expectations rise to the available technology, we're not going to be satisfied with, there was a time when if your watch was a minute off a day, it was considered an accurate watch. That's accurate. That's perfectly acceptable because we're not that precise. And realistically, we're still not that precise in general. Going to school, I get there early enough to where, I'm not counting the seconds before I can walk in the classroom, And so, it's the myth of precision that this thing has to be plus or minus, X number of seconds a day. I don't live that way. When I take my medicines, and when I take my medicines, I don't take them the same second every day. I don't even take them the same minute. I take them the same general time every day. And so, but we've been programmed to believe that we need the most precise. Now, if we're talking about for work, that's a whole different animal. If we have two elements and they're coordinating to do a task and they're not in direct communication, and their watches are, say atomically synchronized. And they've got to turn keys at the exact second. That makes sense. Then it leaves the realm of a watch and becomes a tool. And so,
like, or you're talking about the Apollo missions, right? I forgot which one, the one that had the equipment failure, where
13.
they actually had to use their, mechanical Omega Speedmaster to time maneuvers, which boggles my mind, right? But and that's amazing, and that's clearly. Oh, stop teasing me.
I'm sorry. Go on as you were.
Oh goodness, I mean, and that's why, right? Like I don't want a Speedmaster because of what it can do now, and for my timing purposes,
right?
Because I've got a timer on my phone that's more accurate.
Yeah,
but
yep.
I do want it because of its historical significance and the fact that at one point this was the pinnacle of precision engineering, and that boggles my mind. The fact that humans can calculate that, and this was calculated before they had the software to do it easily now.
It's so funny because this one that we just assembled here has more joules than the Speedmaster does, and the Speedmaster's a chronograph. This is a non-chron. This is just a 3-hander, and it's got 24 joules, because it's an NH35, and this has 17, and it's a chronograph. That to me, that's hilarious. But it, and they were using this thing as a tool before Apollo 13, the very first moon landing. The very first person to step off the ladder didn't have his on because the clock in the lunar module had broken, and his was hanging in the lunar module. They were using it as the clock.
That's awesome. So interesting. So the clock in the lunar module was actually an Accutron.
Yeah,
which is another. I love that technology. I think it's pretty amazing.
It was revolutionary. It was, and I actually think I wish someone had continued to develop and make the tuning fork a viable commercial entity on to today, because there is nothing like the hum of an Accutron on your wrist.
Oh yes.
I mean, you can hear it as when you're going to sleep. You put your arm under the pillow and you can hear it through the pillow. Just that subtle hum coming through the pillow. It's just so pleasing to the ear. And so it way more pleasing than the tick, 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 just that hum. It's like, oh, that is just.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think Omega made the super high frequency version was like 600 some.
I had one. I had an Omega. They call it the F300. And when I opened the back, when I first got it, I opened the back, and the movement was marked Bulova. Bulova made.
So the first.
Yeah.
Yep. So the first Omega tuning forks, the 300 hertz, were actually made by Bulova.
Yeah.
The movements were made by Bulova, and then it wasn't Swatch Group yet at that time. I forgot what their name was at the time. Then they bought specs and started producing them, and then they actually made their own tuning fork movement, which was the 600, the super high frequency.
Oh yeah. It was six something. Yeah,
exactly. And that one I think was made into the 80s, but then that was kind of done with that. But,
ran it out of time. Yeah, very pleasing. Very, very pleasing to the ear. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'd like to see. I've never had one of the higher frequencies. It'd be interesting to listen to the two. And,
oh yeah.
They sound like.
I don't think I've ever seen one of the higher frequencies. So I just have seen the F300s, and I just lucked upon it. I bought it for $50, and I did it. Well, it wasn't working, and so the guy was like, "Well, will you give me $50 for it?" And I'm like, "Well, it says Omega on the dial, sure." So I bought it, and then I took it over to a watchmaker there in Oklahoma City, and he literally popped a battery in it, and it just came to life. And I was like, holy cow! I just bought an Omega Electronic for $50 plus the cost of a battery. And you know, I wore it for about 2 months. It was of the era. It had the silver dial and the silver, you know, the stainless steel case, and I put a black leather strap on it and just wore it every day and just loved the hum of it. Oh, it was so wonderful. And then, as most watch people do, I took it off one day, put something else on, and fell in love with it. And then, well, the rest is just like we all look back and go, I should never have traded that watch.
Yeah, so that's why I never wear any watch for more than one day.
That's smart.
I'm kidding, but I almost feel bad. Like I'm like, oh my God, these other ones are getting jealous. I should wear a different one today.
I just buy them. I buy a new one. I'm like, oh, you know, I've got to have that, and so I buy it. I got the. I'm gonna get another one of these, the new Seiko 5, where they have the different shaped case instead of the round.
That's a great case.
Yeah, and I bought this just for the case until I saw the dial actually had that pattern. It looks like it. Oh, I really need it. There, you can see the stripes now. Can you see the stripes on the dial?
Yeah.
When I lean it, those are actually the little Seiko 5 logo. So the whole dial is covered in a pattern that is the Seiko 5 logo. It's really just, so now I'm like, I don't want to change that. I don't want to change anything about that. So
that's great. Like I said, like I was saying, I think the only thing I would is I'm not a big fan of the 4 o'clock crowns on non-diver watches.
Right.
You know, I think that would look slick with a 3 o'clock, but really that's a very classy case and a much better improvement over the previous SMK.
Well, they didn't recess they didn't hide. It's not a hidden crown. They actually
nice.
They notched out the case so you can see the crown, which I like. But you know, when you get into like the field watch style, you kind of feel obligated to use a round case, because they originals were round cases with sort of afterthought lugs, and so that's not what this one was meant to be like. And so, but anyway, well, I've had a blast. Have you guys had fun?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you say we wrap this little party up? I'll do some pictures of this here a little later. Actually, when it gets dark outside and I'm just sitting out on the patio, I'll do some snaps, and we'll go ahead and put this on Instagram.
Yeah, why don't you throw it on the wrist real quick? We'll get a obligatory wrist shot before you wrap up. And by the way, John Wells just commented and said that this is much nicer than your last silver pour.
Oh wow, that was a low blow. That was a low blow. That's all right though. He's allowed to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and slap this on there. Is that? Yeah, I think I got it 1 notch too tight.
Oh man, that's. I am really liking that strap. I love the straps that kind of look like they got some age to them, and that one just kind of out of the box has that kind of like it's earned its stripes kind of look to it.
Needs a black buckle, which the NATO Coming has a black buckle, but I could not do NATOs for the longest time. And then a friend of mine, actually Jared, who is he still in the chat side? Jared Troy. He might have popped out. But he taught me something, because we were sitting in class one day, and he wears the 24-hour dial Glycine Airman. That's his watch of choice, and he wears it on a NATO. And I'm like, he let me borrow it one time, and I was like, yeah, I can't do NATOs. They dig into my wrist, and I tried his on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even feel the strap. He's like, the secret is you take the NATO when it's brand new, you throw it in a pair of jeans pocket, and you wash them about 4 times. And it breaks down that real stiffness to the strap to where it's softer on the wrist. And so, yeah, because when I did that one time, I only washed this one time, but it made all the difference in the world, because when I first got this, it was really super rigid, and now it's just like 2 layers of khaki pants. So
Nice.
so yeah, I'll get some in focus pictures of it, and we can get them up on Instagram so everyone can see the finished product. But
So yeah, so our bit of advice for the day is watchmaking advice was
slow down.
all over the place. Slow down. Make sure your area is clean. Don't touch the dial. Don't touch the movement.
Yeah, don't touch
with
anything
finger cuffs.
unnecessarily. Yeah.
Lubricate the stem before you put it in for the last time. And our more watch enthusiast bit of advice is stick your strap in your pocket and wash your pants.
Yeah, wash your pants a few times, and it'll soften up that fabric strap. Yeah.
Well, I've learned a lot.
See, we've got something for everybody. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys letting me do this, and I appreciate you guys coming on. It was an honor to have you guys on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been awesome.
Yeah. So
Really cool.
I'm gonna go ahead and end this live chat. If you guys want live chat, if you guys want to hang out for a second.
Okay.
And,
All right then. I think